In the quiet town of Laramie, Wyoming, in 1861, life moved at a slow but steady pace. The sun rose over the dusty streets, casting long shadows on the wooden buildings that lined the way. Among these structures stood a small house, where Claire Maddox lived alone after the heart-wrenching loss of her husband. Just a few months ago, she had been married to a kind man who loved her dearly. Now, she found herself navigating life without his warmth and support. Claire was still coming to terms with her new reality. Grief weighed heavily on her heart, and every day felt like climbing a steep hill. She missed the simple joys they had shared, evenings by the fire, laughter echoing in their home, and dreams of a bright future. Instead, she now faced whispers and curious gazes from townsfolk who barely knew her. As a young widow in a small town, her every move was scrutinized. The local merchant, a prominent figure in Laramie named Mr. Hargrove, had taken notice of Claire's beauty and vulnerability. He often visited her when he delivered supplies to her doorstep, looking for excuses to linger longer than necessary. His advances were unwelcome. Claire found his attention unsettling and disrespectful to the memory of her husband. Yet, each time she politely rejected him, his demeanor shifted from charm to irritation. It soon became clear that Mr. Hargrove did not take rejection lightly. With mounting frustration, he spread lies about Claire among the townspeople, rumors that painted her as dishonest and untrustworthy. One fateful afternoon, those rumors culminated in disaster when she was accused of theft after being seen near his store just moments after an item went missing. The accusation felt like a knife plunging into her already wounded heart. As Claire was dragged through the streets by rough hands, tears stung her eyes from both humiliation and anger. The townspeople gathered around, cheering like it was some sort of spectacle rather than an injustice unfolding before them. Chained and barefoot in the mud, each step felt heavier than the last as they marched toward the jail. The mayor stepped forward to add to her shame with venomous words ready on his lips. Just as he prepared to humiliate her further in front of the crowd, a gunshot rang out sharp and unexpected. Dust erupted at his feet as gasps filled the air. Everyone turned their eyes upward to see Eli Kane perched on a nearby rooftop with his rifle aimed directly at the mayor's feet, a warning shot that echoed through the town square. No one knew why he had chosen this moment to intervene, or what his true intentions were. But they all remembered tales of Eli's prowess with a gun and his notorious reputation. Meanwhile, Claire stood bewildered by this sudden turn of events, unsure who this man was or why he chose to help her amidst such chaos. The days following Claire Maddox's husband's death were heavy with sorrow, but one thing she never anticipated was the unwelcome attention of Mr. Hargrove. He was a tall man with a commanding presence, his clothes tailored to perfection, and his smile often misplaced, especially when he lingered too long at her doorstep. His visits began as friendly gestures, delivering supplies and looking for company in the quiet town. At first, Claire welcomed the distraction, unaware of his creeping intentions. As time went on, Mr. Hargrove's demeanor changed. His once familiar visits grew increasingly uncomfortable. The way he looked at her felt differentless, respectful, and more possessive. One afternoon, after he unloaded a shipment of grains, he leaned closer, letting his hand brush against hers. "You're a beautiful woman, Claire," he said, almost too softly for her to hear. She felt a shiver run down her spine, one she wished would fade away. "You shouldn't be alone out here." Claire's heart raced with discomfort. "Thank you, Mr. Hargrove, but I am fine," she replied firmly, stepping back as if to create distance not only physically but emotionally. But the merchant was undeterred by her polite refusals. Each day brought new attempts, a lingering touch here or a compliment there that made her skin crawl. He began showing up unexpectedly, and often waited for her near the well or on her porch. Despite her clear objections, his persistence became suffocating. It wasn't long before whispers began to sweep through Laramie about Claire's relationship with the merchant, whispers that Hargrove himself encouraged. She must enjoy his company, some townsfolk claimed with narrow-minded pity. After all, who would turn away such a gentleman? Claire could feel the weight of their scrutinizing gazes and wished they could understand the truth. There was nothing she enjoyed about his company. One fateful evening, tensions escalated when Hargrove cornered her outside her home as the sun dipped below the horizon. "You should really reconsider my offer," he suggested, his voice low and menacing. "You'd be safer with someone like me." Claire's heart hammered in her chest as she stood her ground. "No means no," she declared firmly, shaking her head defiantly. His charming facade shattered at this rejection. An anger fueled by entitlement flashed in his eyes. "You'll regret refusing me," he sneered before storming off. That night marked the shift in their relationship from unwanted advances to something darker. Hargrove, feeling scorned and vengeful, began spinning tales among townspeople that cast Claire in an unfavorable light. Days later, when an item went missing from his store, it became the perfect opportunity for him to manipulate the truth and accuse her of theft. Claire had no idea that this singular act of defiance against his advances would lead to such devastating consequences. Social standing crumbling as rumors spread faster than wildfire through Laramie and, ultimately setting the stage for chaos on that fateful day she'd never forget. The atmosphere in Laramie shifted dramatically as the gossip surrounding Claire Maddox grew. On the day of her public accusation, the townspeople gathered in droves, their faces painted with anger and excitement, ready to witness what they believed was justice served. They had heard the rumors spun by Mr. Hargrove, and with every retelling, Claire's reputation crumbled further. What began as whispers in the streets quickly transformed into a cacophony of accusatory shouts. As Claire was dragged toward the jail, chains clinking against her ankles, the crowd erupted into a frenzy. They cheered as if they were witnessing a performance rather than an injustice. "Thief!" they yelled, their voices rising in unison like a chorus fueled by blind rage. Each shout felt like a dagger, piercing her heart and amplifying her shame. Claire could hardly believe that these were her neighbors' people she had known during happier times. With every step she took through the mud, their jeers echoed in her mind, drowning out reason and compassion. She caught glimpses of familiar faces twisted into expressions of disdain. Friends turned into foes in an instant. Mothers covered their children's eyes as if shielding them from a terrible sight, while men stood taller, puffing out their chests as they joined in the mockery. "Someone should teach her a lesson," one man shouted, inciting even more fervor from the crowd. "We can't let her get away with this," another voice called out. "What kind of woman steals from honest men?" The mob mentality took hold, transforming rational individuals into a vengeful force united by a single purpose: to punish Claire without seeking the truth. Claire's heart raced as fear gripped her tightly. She had become an object of scorn, instead of a grieving widow seeking solace. The weight of their collective anger pressed down on her shoulders like an enormous boulder. She wanted to scream that she was innocent, that she had been wronged by Hargrove's lies, but her voice faltered amidst the chaos. As they approached the jail's entrance, Claire saw Mayor Thompson waiting with a smug expression on his face, ready to relish this moment of public humiliation. He stepped forward to deliver his judgment, the final nail in her coffin, when suddenly, a deafening gunshot shattered the tension in the air. The crowd gasped collectively, eyes darting toward the source of the sound. Dust flew up at the mayor's feet as he stumbled back in shock, confusion spreading among the townsfolk. The cheers turned to murmurs of uncertainty as Eli Kane appeared atop a nearby rooftop, his rifle still aimed at Mayor Thompson's figure, both feared and respected in equal measure. No one had expected this interruption. No one understood why this infamous gunfighter chose to intervene at that precise moment. But one thing was clear: Eli's presence had turned the tide of chaos into something else entirely. As silence fell over the crowd, Claire stood bewildered, but filled with a flicker of hope that perhaps justice might still have a chance amidst such turmoil. As Claire Maddox was pulled through the muddy streets of Laramie, the weight of chains around her ankles felt unbearable. The cold, wet earth clung to her bare feet, each step a painful reminder of her helplessness. The townspeople lined the path like spectators at a grim spectacle, their faces twisted with mockery and excitement. It was a parade of shame, and she was the unwilling participant. The chill in the air did little to match the heat of humiliation burning in her cheeks. Claire's heart raced, as she caught sight of familiar faces turned into masks of disdain. People she once shared meals with or exchanged pleasantries now jeered at her misfortune. "Look at her," shouted one man, his voice booming over the crowd. "A thief and a liar." The phrase echoed through the throng, feeding the frenzy that had overtaken the town. Each step through the muck felt like a descent into despair. She yearned for just one comforting word, but all she received were shouts that sliced through her spirit. A group of women, once acquaintances, turned their backs on her as they whispered among themselves, their expressions filled with judgment. Claire wished she could disappear into thin air, or somehow prove her innocence, tell them all that she had been wronged by Mr. Hargrove's lies. The weight of her situation pressed down on her like an iron shackle. Vulnerability flooded every part of her being. Her eyes darted around for any sign of compassion or understanding, but all she found were scowls and sneers. Children peered from behind their mothers' skirts, curious about this spectacle unfolding before them, while mothers shielded their young ones' eyes as if to protect them from seeing an example meant to teach fear rather than justice. As she neared the jail, Claire's mind whirled with thoughts of what lay ahead: further humiliation, endless accusations. The mayor's smug face awaited her arrival. She could already picture it contorted with glee as he prepared to deliver his judgment upon her. Suddenly, just as they approached the entrance to the jail, Claire heard a commotion from above. The crowd's cheers turned to gasps, and for a moment confusion spread like wildfire among them. She lifted her head slightly to see Eli Kane standing atop a nearby roof, Tofus rifle aimed toward Mayor Thompson. In that brief pause, time seemed to stand still. For the first time since being dragged from her home, Claire felt a flicker of hope ignite within her chest amidst the chaos. Perhaps there was still a chance to reclaim her dignity. Perhaps someone would finally see through the lies that had ensnared her life in such dire circumstances. The townsfolk fell silent, as Eli's presence shifted everything around them. No longer were they merely spectators. They were witnesses to something far more significant than simple judgment against one woman. With his intervention looming large over them all, Claire could only wait for what would happen next, as fear mingled with hope in equal measure. As Claire approached the entrance of the jail, her heart raced with anticipation and dread. Mayor Thompson stood waiting, his posture exuding authority and malice. He was a stocky man with a thick mustache and piercing eyes that seemed to glimmer with delight at the thought of Claire's impending humiliation. The townsfolk parted to allow him easy access to the front, as if they were eager to witness the spectacle that was about to unfold. With a smirk plastered across his face, the mayor stepped forward, casting a shadow over Claire. "Well, well, what do we have here?" he bellowed, his voice booming through the gathered crowd like thunder. The air thickened with tension as people held their breath in anticipation. "A thief caught red-handed. I must say, it is rare to see justice served so swiftly in this town." Claire's stomach churned at his words. She could feel every eye upon her, their judgment weighing heavily on her shoulders. Despite being chained and vulnerable, she raised her chin defiantly, refusing to let them see how much their scorn affected her. Inside, however, she felt as if she might crumble under the scrutiny. "People of Laramie," Mayor Thompson continued, warming up to his performance, "this woman has brought shame upon our community. We cannot let such actions go unpunished." His proclamation incited murmurs among the crowd. Some gasped, while others nodded in agreement, as his rhetoric ignited their anger even further. Claire felt as though she were being dragged deeper into an abyss of despair. How had everything spiraled so quickly? The man who had once sworn to lead their town now wielded power against her without any regard for truth or compassion. Memories of happier times flashed through her mind, conversations shared with neighbors who now cursed her name, each recollection filled with bitterness. "Mr. Hargrove has been most gracious," Thompson continued with mock sincerity. "He has done us all a service by exposing this dishonest woman for what she truly is." The mayor's eyes gleamed as he scanned the crowd for reactions. Cheers erupted from some while others looked uneasy. "Let's take this opportunity to make an example out of her," someone shouted from the back of the crowd, spurring on more shouts and jeers. Claire's heart sank further. It felt as if they were turning on her like wolves circling prey. Just as Claire braced herself for more mockery from Thompson, the final blow in this cruel display, a loud gunshot rang out through the square, interrupting his tirade and silencing the onlookers in an instant. Dust kicked up around Thompson's feet as he stumbled back in shock. All eyes turned upward toward Eli Kane, who held steady on that rooftop above them, his rifle aimed directly at the mayor's feet. In that moment of unexpected intervention, time seemed suspended. While Claire still faced humiliation and despair standing before the crowd, hope flickered within her heart once again. Perhaps there would be a chance for justice after all amidst such chaotic turmoil. The atmosphere buzzed with tension as Mayor Thompson prepared to deliver his verdict. Claire could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the noise around her fading into a distant roar. Just as he began to raise his voice, planning to deliver the ultimate humiliation, the sharp sound of a gunshot cracked through the air like thunder, splintering the crowd's focus into chaos. Dust erupted at the mayor's feet, and he stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock. The crowd fell silent for a moment, confusion sweeping across their faces as they turned to search for the source of the interruption. All eyes instinctively darted upwards, and they collectively held their breath as they beheld Eli Kane standing resolutely on a nearby rooftop, rifle leveled and steady. Claire's heart raced, not only from her predicament but now also from the sudden excitement that rippled through the crowd. The townspeople, who had just been so fervently ready to condemn her, seemed frozen in disbelief at the sight of the legendary gunfighter. Eli had a reputation that preceded him. Tales of his marksmanship and fearlessness swirled throughout Laramie like ghost stories at night. Not one person dared to speak. It was as if time itself had come to a standstill. Even Mayor Thompson dropped his performative bravado upon seeing the rifle aimed at him, trembling under Eli's calculating glare. For Claire, it was a moment of surreal clarity, a glimmer of hope emerging from the chaos that threatened to consume her life. Eli stood poised atop the rooftop, his expression unreadable but undeniably intense. He surveyed the scene below, assessing the frightened townspeople and their leader now rendered powerless. Claire couldn't help but admire this unexpected savior. She had only heard whispers about Eli before, stories that painted him both as a ruthless outlaw and an enigmatic champion. Now he was here, shifting the tide of fate right before her eyes. As murmurs spread through the crowd, Claire felt a surge of mixed emotions, fear for what Eli was capable of, gratitude for his intervention, and a strange sense of power returning to her. The townspeople were no longer focused on her. They were enveloped in a collective unease, questioning whether they had gone too far in their accusations. Eli's voice rang out then, clear and commanding. "You might want to reconsider your judgment before it's too late." His words echoed over the stunned crowd like a solemn warning, igniting flickers of doubt among those who had been so quick to accuse Claire. The earlier energy shifted from anger to uncertainty as people began to glance sideways at one another, contemplating their choices. In that brief moment, Claire felt as if she were reclaiming a part of herself long lost to shame and fear. She was no longer merely the object of scorn, but rather the center of a dramatic standoff, and she needed to seize this opportunity to stand up for herself. As Eli held his ground, Claire's heart swelled with newfound courage. Perhaps today wouldn't end in despair after all. However, she understood that this was just the beginning of a larger confrontation, a battle for her truth against the deep-rooted beliefs of those around her. Would the town finally recognize the lies woven into Hargrove's accusations, or would Eli's intervention merely serve as a temporary distraction? With hope flickering in her heart, Claire prepared herself for whatever would come next amidst this unexpected twist of fate. As the dust settled from Eli Kane's warning shot, the atmosphere in the square shifted dramatically. The townspeople stood frozen, their eyes wide with shock and disbelief at the sudden appearance of the infamous gunfighter. Rumors about Eli had circulated through Laramie like wildfire, tales of his unmatched skill with a rifle and his ability to instill fear with just a glance. He was a figure both feared and revered, a ghostly legend who walked among them but rarely showed his face. From his high vantage point on the rooftop, Eli surveyed the crowd with a calm intensity. His dark hat shadowed his sharp features, and the sun glinted off his rifle, making it look almost menacing in the tense silence that followed. Claire could hardly believe her eyes as she registered this unexpected savior standing before Harriman, whose reputation alone could silence even the most fervent accusers. As whispers began to ripple through the crowd, Claire caught snippets of conversation that revealed their collective uncertainty. "What's he doing here?" one man murmured, while another questioned if Eli had come to protect Claire or if he simply enjoyed stirring up trouble. The townsfolk's reaction illustrated how Eli's presence had caused a crack in their once unified front against Claire, turning their anger into apprehension. Eli's voice rang out again steady and commanding, cutting through the tension. "This isn't justice," he declared, addressing both Mayor Thompson and the crowd below him. "You're willing to condemn a woman based on gossip and lies? I suggest you take a long, hard look at your actions before you proceed." His words were sharp, but carried an undercurrent of reason that seemed to reach into every corner of town. Claire marveled at how he wielded not only his rifle but also his words as if they were weapons meant to protect her rather than harm. For so long she had felt trapped and powerless under the weight of false accusations and public scorn. Now, Eli had shifted that dynamic entirely. His intervention was nothing short of miraculous, transforming her situation from one of utter disgrace to an unexpected confrontation that rippled with possibility. The mayor faltered for just a moment, glancing up at Eli with unease etched on his face. In contrast to his earlier bravado, Thompson now appeared more like a cornered animal than an authoritative figure ready to pass judgment. The crowd began to murmur again, voices filled with confusion rather than certainty as they considered what Eli had said. "Let's not forget," Eli continued, "that justice is meant to be fair, not swayed by rumors from men who have their own agendas." His gaze shifted momentarily toward Mr. Hargrove, who stood at the edge of the crowd, looking increasingly uncomfortable under scrutiny. In that moment of revelation, Claire felt something within her shift. Doubt began fluttering amongst her accusers like leaves caught in an autumn breeze. She dared to hope that perhaps this Mantha one whose name echoed through taverns and dark alleys might actually stand by her side in this fight for truth. With renewed strength flooding her veins, Claire straightened her back and locked eyes with Eli atop that rooftop, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, as she realized she was no longer alone in this battle against injustice. Whatever lay ahead in this chaotic standoff would require courage from both of them, but now there was hope where only despair had lingered moments before. In the wake of Eli Kane's gunshot, the square fell into a strange stillness, punctuated only by the muffled gasps of the townsfolk. Confusion swept through the crowd like wildfire, and faces that had once been filled with anger suddenly reflected uncertainty. Eyes darted from Eli on the rooftop to Claire, who stood chained and trembling, her heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. The impact of Eli's unexpected intervention rippled through every person present, forcing them to reconsider their stance in an instant. "What just happened?" whispered one man in disbelief, glancing around as if searching for an answer. Others murmured anxious questions among themselves, their earlier zeal for Claire's condemnation now replaced by doubt. The grip of mob mentality began to loosen as they pondered Eli's motives and what exactly they had just witnessed. Mayor Thompson, who had been so quick to revel in Claire's disgrace moments before, was now rendered speechless. The bravado that had defined him was stripped away as he struggled to regain his composure. Eli's presence loomed large above them, a reminder that the line between hero and outlaw was far more blurred than many cared to admit. Claire stood at a crossroads within herself, bewildered by the sudden turn of events. She didn't know much about Ellie, only that he was a figure cloaked in rumor and fear. Now, however, she could see him clearly through her own eyes, someone willing to fight against the tide of injustice on her behalf. Hope flickered gently inside her like a candle igniting against a backdrop of darkness. "What's he doing here?" Someone on the edge of the crowd wondered aloud, breaking through the tension. Shifting their focus from Claire to Eli caused a chain reaction. Whispers filled with awe replaced shouts of indignation. "Is he here for her? Or is this some kind of game?" Claire felt an overwhelming sense of vulnerability, intermingling with gratitude, as Eli maintained his rifle steady before him. His calm demeanor contrasted starkly with the crowd's rising anxiety, In their eyes lay conflicting emotions, fear mingled with respect. And she realized this man had commanded authority even without speaking. Eli's authoritative voice broke through again as he addressed the people below him. "Do not be so quick to pass judgment," he urged passionately. "Justice is not served by vengeance, but rather by an understanding of truth." His words rang out like a clarion call amidst the chaos, shifting hearts and minds among those standing before him. As murmurs grew louder, Claire felt emboldened by this champion standing alongside her, an unexpected ally who was unafraid to challenge what was wrong in their community. In that moment, she no longer felt like just an accused woman. She felt empowered to reclaim her narrative and fight back against lies. The chaos left behind from Hargrove's initial accusations seemed less powerful now, weakened under Eli's unwavering presence in opposition to it. Voices once filled with anger were now hesitant and uncertain as people looked around at one another, questioning what they believed as fear began to transform into ambivalence. Perhaps today would mark a turning point, not just for Claire, but for Laramie itself. With renewed determination coursing through her veins, Claire straightened her shoulders and prepared herself for whatever would come. Next, the tumultuous challenge ahead was daunting yet filled with possibility, as she stood resolute against both her accusers and the ghosts of her past worries, fading into insignificance at last. As dusk fell over Laramie, a soft glow enveloped the town, casting long shadows that danced across the streets. Claire Maddox sat in the small, dimly lit cell where she had been confined after the chaotic events of the day. The weight of her circumstances draped heavily on her shoulders, and despite the flicker of hope ignited by Eli's intervention earlier, fear and uncertainty still lingered like shadows in her mind. The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, breaking the oppressive silence of her confinement. Claire looked up, her heart racing as she wondered who would dare approach at this hour. To her surprise, as the door creaked open, it was Eli Kane who stepped inside. He looked different now. The fierce gunfighter she'd seen earlier was replaced by a man who seemed more contemplative and guarded. The rifle that had commanded so much attention was nowhere in sight, leaving an aura of vulnerability to hang between them. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his voice low and steady as he leaned against the doorframe. His presence filled the small room with an intensity that made Claire's pulse quicken once more. She hadn't expected him to seek her out after everything that had happened, yet here he was, an unexpected ally when no one else dared to lift their gaze toward her. I'm managing," Claire replied quietly, unsure if she should reveal how deeply shaken she truly felt. "Thank you for what you did today." Her words were laced with both gratitude and a hint of confusion. What drove a man like Eli to intervene in such a public way? He nodded slowly, taking a step closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "I couldn't stand by and watch them condemn you without knowing the truth," Eli admitted, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her feel exposed yet strangely safe at the same time. "Truth? It feels like no one cares about that anymore," Claire said bitterly, recalling how quickly friends had turned into foes at the mere whisper of gossip. She could still hear their jeers echoing in her mind. Eli shifted his weight slightly but remained focused on her. "Sometimes it takes someone from outside to see clearly," he offered gently. "You're stronger than they realize." His words hung in the air between a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. Claire felt something stir within her, a sense of connection to this enigmatic man who had risked so much for someone he barely knew. "But why me?" she asked earnestly, searching for answers in his expression. "You could have walked away instead." Eli paused, considering his response carefully, as if weighing each word before letting it fall from his lips. "Because I've seen too many innocents suffer while others look away," he said with conviction. "You deserve someone to stand up for you, especially when no one else will." As they shared this moment in the fading light, Claire felt herself begin to trust him, a feeling that felt both foreign and exhilarating all at once. Their strange bond began to form amid chaos and uncertainty. She realized that perhaps Eli represented more than just an ally, he embodied hope. Though darkness loomed outside her cell and uncertainty surrounded them both, a flicker of courage kindled within Claire's heart as she prepared herself for whatever lay ahead. She knew that they would face this challenge together, not just for herself, but for justice that seemed so far out of reach not long before. In that moment, with Eli Kane standing beside her, unfazed by either fear or prejudice, Claire understood that their paths had crossed for a reason. To reclaim not only her dignity, but also a sense of purpose amidst overwhelming despair. As Claire sat in the dim light of her cell, she couldn't shake the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind about Eli Kane. He had stepped into her life during one of her darkest moments, and she found herself increasingly curious about the man behind the reputation. Stories of his skill as a gunfighter and his unpredictable nature echoed through Laramie like the wind carrying whispers through the tall grass. Why had he chosen to intervene on her behalf? What drove someone known for violence to step into such a chaotic scene and not only disrupt it, but put himself in danger for her? Claire's thoughts spiraled with questions as she replayed their brief conversation over and over again in her mind. She felt a strange connection to him, one that stirred both gratitude and confusion deep within her heart. Eli's calm demeanor in the face of chaos fascinated her. He moved with an ease that spoke of confidence, yet there was also a vulnerability that flickered beneath the surface, especially when he looked at her. It was as if he carried burdens of his own, yet could still recognize the weight of hers. Was he merely a man who enjoyed playing hero, or did he carry deeper convictions about justice and truth? Unable to contain her curiosity any longer, Claire recalled the glimmers of humanity she'd glimpsed in Eli's eyes. There had been something more than mere bravado. She sensed a yearning for understanding and perhaps redemption in his voice when he spoke about justice not being served by vengeance. Her mind raced with possibilities about his past. Was Eli haunted by his own experiences with injustice? Did he have personal reasons for stepping up to defend someone else? As an outsider living on the fringes of morality, from what had he fled, real or perceived? Claire wondered whether he felt isolated too, just like she did amidst judgmental stares and whispered accusations. That night after Eli left, Claire couldn't sleep. She lay awake thinking about what tomorrow might bring. She thought of Eli standing up for her against those who sought to drag her down deeper into despair. His unexpected support inspired a flicker of courage within that began to overshadow her fears. If Eli understood what it meant to be both feared and misunderstood, then perhaps their paths crossing held more significance than she realized. The burden of guilt from having been wronged bore heavy upon her heart, but now there was also the weight of hope that came with trust. Suddenly, Claire envisioned him not just as a gunfighter but as something more complex, a potential ally in a battle against wrongdoing. Perhaps through their collaboration, they could force the town to see beyond their biases and misconceptions. Could this enigmatic figure help restore not just her dignity, but also challenge what they all believed to be true? As dawn approached, illuminating shadows from the night before, Claire resolved to uncover more about Eli's motivations and history and maybe even share pieces of herself once she felt stronger. With every moment spent questioning who Eli truly was, Claire realized he wasn't just an act of bravado but perhaps a kindred spirit who would stand firm against the injustices they both faced. This connection between them could blossom into something powerful, if nurtured properly, a possibility for understanding and change not just for Claire, but perhaps for Laramie itself as well. She prepared herself mentally and emotionally for whatever lay ahead because now it didn't seem so bleak. With each flicker of hope ignited by their unique bond, came fresh resolve to reclaim what had been taken from them both. As the moon rose high in the sky, casting a silvery light over Laramie, Claire Maddox felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. After Eli's visit, she found her thoughts lingering on the man who had dared to stand up for her, despite the chaos surrounding their worlds. The weight of her troubles felt lighter with the hope he'd sparked within her, but the uncertainties of their bond remained. That evening, she was surprised when Eli returned to see her again. This time he slipped quietly into the small cell, with an ease that indicated familiarity, as if he had walked these paths many times before but never for anyone like her. "I thought you might want some company," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The shadows danced around them, making him appear more enigmatic than ever. Claire nodded slowly, taking in his presence, her heart racing as he stepped closer. The darkness feels less daunting when shared, she replied honestly, echoing the sentiment that had crept into her mind since he first intervened on her behalf. Eli leaned against the wall near the door, arms crossed casually, yet his eyes betrayed a hint of seriousness. People often forget that sometimes we just need someone to listen to validate our struggles. His words resonated deeply within Claire. It was a breath of fresh air to hear someone acknowledge the weight of her sorrows instead of dismissing them. "What drives you to help me?" Claire found herself asking suddenly, unable to contain her curiosity and gratitude. "You have your own battles to fight." Eli paused before responding, his gaze drifting toward the small barred window where soft crickets chirped outside. "I've seen too many people wronged by their own towns and turned into scapegoats," he admitted quietly. "I understand what it feels like to be deemed guilty without a chance to defend oneself." Those words touched something deep inside Claire, an understanding and empathy she hadn't expected from someone like him. "You've been through similar pain?" she ventured gently. He nodded slowly. "I've lost people close to me because justice was eclipsed by ignorance and fear. I won't let that happen again if I can help it." His voice held a gravity that filled the small space with sincerity. Amongst this exchange of vulnerabilities, Claire felt an emotional bridge forming built on trust and shared experiences that transcended their circumstances. The weight of grief they both carried felt distinctly lighter now. Perhaps this was what she needed most at this moment, a bond forged in understanding instead of animosity. Under the cloak of night, as they spoke about their lives and their struggles, every revelation drew them closer together. Eli shared stories from his past, the harrowing decisions he had to make, and how they shaped who he had become today, while Claire opened up about her husband's death and the suffocating isolation that followed. With each word exchanged, Claire began to see Eli not just as a gunfighter but as a compassionate soul, intersecting with her path at just the right moment. Their bond deepened with authenticity, a connection woven through shared struggles that held potential for healing. By the time their conversation came to a close, uncertainty began to fade for Claire. She realized they were both fighting battles unseen, wounded by their experiences, yet drawing strength from one another in profound ways. As Eli prepared to leave, she grasped at the fleeting threads of courage blossoming inside her and spoke softly but firmly, "Thank you for standing beside me." Eli's gaze softened as he looked back at her one last time, a silent pledge passing between them as their destinies intertwined amidst Laramie's darkest nights and uncertain dawns ahead. Whatever awaited them both in the days to come would not be faced alone. They would stand together against whatever storms lay ahead. As the days passed in Laramie, the air grew thick with tension and unease, fueled by the whispers of rumors that swirled around Claire Maddox like a storm. What had once been a simple accusation of theft had transformed into a wildfire of speculation, turning her from a grieving widow into the town's most wanted villain. The name Claire Maddox now echoed through the streets, accompanied by disdain and contempt as townsfolk gathered to share their opinions, stoking the flames of mistrust. Hargrove, who had orchestrated her downfall, reveled in the chaos he had created. With each retelling of Claire's supposed crime, he sowed deeper seeds of doubt and animosity in the hearts of those who once knew her. She could already feel the shift in how people looked at her, as if she carried a stain that would never wash away. Even those who had previously offered sympathy began to distance themselves, casting glances filled with suspicion rather than compassion. It was during one of these dark evenings that Claire overheard snippets of conversation while trying to remain hidden in the shadows. "She must have done something terrible to deserve this," one woman remarked, her voice dripping with judgment. "No decent person would act like a thief." The words pierced Claire's heart like daggers, and she felt a wave of panic rise within her. What if they truly believed she was guilty? The thought sent shivers down her spine as she grappled with the frightening reality that her safety was at risk. The mob mentality that had taken hold of the community left her feeling vulnerable and exposed, knowing that anger could easily lead to violence. Eli's earlier intervention had given her a glimmer of hope, but now that light seemed dimmer in the face of such widespread condemnation. Alone in her cell, Claire replayed their conversations in her mind, longing for Eli's visit when she could feel a connection, the warmth of understanding, amid the coldness of rejection outside these walls. That night, As darkness enveloped Laramie once more, Claire resolved to find a way out of this nightmare. She couldn't allow herself to be trapped by lies and hysteria any longer. With Eli's support echoing in her thoughts, she began to formulate plans to confront her accusers directly and reclaim her narrative. But would anyone listen to her if the tide of public opinion was against her? Her heart raced with fear and determination as she realized she could not do this alone. She needed Eli more than ever. He was not just an ally but someone who understood what it meant to fight against being wronged. Perhaps together they could persuade the townspeople to see the truth before it consumed her completely. As dawn approached, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose wash over her amidst the rising tensions outside. She would seek out Eli and share her plan. They would face this challenge head-on together. She hoped that with his presence beside her, they could uncover the lies woven around her name and expose Mr. Hargrove for what he truly was, a manipulative man, willing to destroy lives for his own gain. With each passing moment, Claire felt stronger, no longer just a victim, but a woman ready to stand up for herself and fight back against the tide of hatred threatening to engulf her town. It was time for Laramie to hear her story and remember that truth always has a way of breaking through even the darkest clouds. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the town of Laramie into twilight, Claire found herself consumed by thoughts of Eli and the looming dangers that surrounded her. The whispers from the townsfolk had grown louder, transformed into a cacophony of accusations that left her feeling vulnerable and hunted. It was not just Mr. Proserpin's Hargrove's manipulation she had to fear. Rumors spread like wildfire, inflating hysteria and painting her as a villain in their eyes. Claire could sense that even her previous sympathizers were beginning to withdraw, leaving her isolated in the very town where she had once felt safe. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her heart as anxiety gripped her. The shadows cast by the fading light felt ominous, and she couldn't shake off the chilling realization that there were threats lurking beyond mere words. Unscrupulous individuals might take matters into their own hands if they believed they could win favor by acting against her. The door to her cell creaked open suddenly, and Eli stepped in his presence, both calming and electrifying. He closed the door behind him, casting an expectant glance around as if ensuring they were alone. "I heard things out there," he began cautiously, his tone serious yet concerned. "The gossip is growing more dangerous by the day." Claire's heart sank at his words, but also stirred with gratitude that he was here, someone willing to stand by her when few others would dare approach. "I know," she confessed softly, wrapping her arms around herself as though to ward off an impending chill. Eli moved closer, his eyes searching hers with intensity. "You need to be careful, Claire. The townspeople are turning on you quickly." His voice was steady but low enough to keep their conversation private, a stark contrast to the rising tide of negativity outside those walls. "I can't let them destroy me over lies," she replied defiantly, but inside she felt the weight of distress threatening to push through. "They'll believe anything they hear." Eli's expression hardened slightly, revealing depths of protectiveness that made Claire's chest tighten with both fear and admiration. "You can't face this alone," he urged gently but firmly. "If it comes to violence—" "Violence?" Claire interrupted hastily, panic creeping into her voice. "Surely they wouldn't." "I've seen it happen before," Eli interjected with intensity, cutting through her trepidation with a raw truth that hung thick in the air between them. When people feel justified by their anger or fear of something unknown, they become unpredictable. Claire met his gaze, reading the sincerity in his eyes and feeling a connection deepen amidst the shadows enveloping them both. She understood instinctively that Eli was not merely warning her for dramatic effect. He genuinely cared about what could happen next. "But what can I do?" Her voice trembled slightly as vulnerability seeped through her facade of determination. "Stay close to me," Eli replied without hesitation, locking his gaze with hers as if solidifying a silent pact between them. "I'll help you navigate this." Claire felt a spark of hope reignite within her. Perhaps this alliance could be the lifebuoy she needed amidst turbulent waters. However precarious their situation might be filled with danger from both rumors and violent tendencies, together they possessed strength neither had when standing alone. With every second spent sharing this moment with him beneath dim light and growing tension outside their confinesa bond, slowly forget it became clear that this partnership would be pivotal for what lay ahead. Facing both relentless gossip and unyielding hostility from those who sought her ruin. As they stood together in quiet solidarity, Claire felt emboldened by Eli's protective instincts, ready to tackle whatever treacherous waters awaited them beyond those cell doors, as long as they faced it side by side. The tension in Laramie reached a boiling point one fateful evening, as a small gang of local thugsmen, emboldened by the town's collective disdain for Claire, gathered outside the tavern, their laughter echoing off the wooden walls. Armed with crude weapons and brimming with false bravado, they plotted dishonest ways to confront Claire now that she was perceived as vulnerable. Their leader, a burly man named Sledge, had made it his mission to ensure that Claire felt the full weight of the town's wrath, fueled by Mr. Hargrove's malicious machinations. Eli Kane had been keeping a watchful eye on Claire since their bond had grown. After hearing whispers about the gang's intent to confront her, his protective instincts surged to the forefront. He understood the danger posed not only by the rumors circulating but also by those willing to act on their misguided anger. The thought of Claire facing these thugs alone struck a chord deep within him. He wouldn't allow anyone else to suffer while he stood idly by. When the night fully settled in, Eli decided to intervene. He moved stealthily through the narrowing alleys of Laramie, his footsteps silent as he approached the tavern where he could hear the raucous laughter spilling out into the street. He needed to assess the situation but also prepare for any confrontation that might arise. The reputation he bore as a gunfighter preceded him, but it was not something he relished. Instead, it was a badge he wore for all the right reasons. Inside, Sledge and his gang were loudly discussing their plans, taunting one another as they drank and boasted about what they intended to do to Claire. "That thief deserves to be taught a lesson," Sledge bellowed, sending waves of laughter through his companions. "Let's show her what happens when you cross honest men." Eli clenched his fists at that remark, but remained composed, knowing that giving in to anger would not serve either him or Claire well. He waited for just the right moment, watching as the gang finished their drinks and prepared to head toward Claire's resting place. With precision and an air of authority, Eli stepped into view, blocking the exit as they stumbled into the street. "Looking for someone?" Eli asked coolly, his eyes narrowed and unwavering. His presence silenced the rowdy group instantly. They hadn't expected any opposition. Sledge sneered at Eli, clearly unimpressed yet brimming with bravado. "This doesn't concern you, Kane," he spat back, trying to play off his discomfort with bravado. "Oh, it concerns me very much," Eli replied, his voice steady and firm. "You're about to make a very serious mistake." The tension crackled in the air as Eli took a purposeful step forward, his imposing stature filling the narrow street. The thugs shifted uneasily under his gaze. They had heard stories about Eli's skills with a gun enough to sway their confidence. "We're just having a bit of fun." One man tried weakly to dismiss Eli's warning. "Fun at another person's expense?" Eli challenged, his expression darkening. "You'll find that there are consequences for your actions." As Sledge's bravado began to wane under Eli's unwavering gaze, there was an unmistakable moment when he realized they were outmatched. The gang hesitated, unsure whether to confront this infamous figure or retreat, rather than face the impending violence that would surely follow. Just then, Eli reached for his sidearm, a swift motion that sent chills down their spines. "Let me make this simple. Leave Claire alone, or you'll find yourselves regretting your choices tonight." "Ah." The silence hung heavy between them until Sledge finally backed down, grumbling angrily but recognizing Eli's threat for what it was, a warning not to be ignored. With reluctant compliance, the thugs retreated into the shadows from which they came, leaving Eli standing resolute in defense of Claire. As he turned towards her resting place, Eli felt a surge of relief wash over him. He had acted decisively and protected her from harm once again. He could only hope she recognized how far he would go to ensure her safety and dignity were upheld, the promise he intended to keep, regardless of what lay ahead in their tumultuous journey together. After Eli's decisive confrontation with the local thugs, Claire Maddox felt a surge of resolve awaken within her. The sense of safety Eli had managed to provide, albeit temporarily, left her contemplating the next steps in her fight against the rising tide of accusations. She couldn't remain a prisoner of fear any longer. She had to confront her accusers and take control of her destiny. With Eli's confident presence behind her, Claire stood at the threshold of what felt like a reckoning. The moon hung high in the sky, illuminating the cobblestone streets of Laramie as she stepped outside. The air was charged with tension, but rather than cower away, she embraced it as an opportunity for empowerment. The thoughts swirling in her mind melded into determination. She resolved to go to the town's square and speak to Mr. Hargrove, the very man who had orchestrated her public humiliation. "Are you sure about this?" Eli's voice brought her from her reverie, and she turned to see concern etched on his features. She could feel the weight of his gaze, a mix of protectiveness and respect. "I have to be," Claire replied, her voice steady. "If I don't stand up now, I'll forever be remembered as a thief. They need to hear my side." Eli hesitated, but then nodded, understanding that she needed this for herself just as much as she needed his support. "I'll be right by your side," he promised, his voice resolute. "We'll face them together." The two of them made their way toward the town square in silence, each lost in their thoughts about what lay ahead. The streets were unusually quiet that night. It felt as if the entire town was holding its breath in anticipation for what was to come. Claire's heart raced, but with every step taken alongside Eli, a flicker of confidence sparked within her. As they reached the square, the flickering lanterns cast a warm glow that belied the tension simmering beneath the surface. A small crowd began to gather, curious about the rumors circulating about Claire's impending confrontation. Among them stood Mr. Hargrove, his expression smug and patronizing as he reveled in the attention. "Here she comes, the thief herself," he called out with a mock cheeriness that dripped disdain. Laughter erupted from some members of the crowd, but Claire felt unshaken. Eli's presence beside her anchored her. Taking a deep breath, Claire stepped forward and raised her voice above the jeering crowd. "I am not a thief," she declared firmly, her tone unwavering as she locked eyes with Hargrove. "You've turned me into your scapegoat to serve your interests." The laughter died down as people began to listen, a murmur rippling through the crowd like a destabilizing wave. She pressed on, fueled by both Eli's assurance and her own newfound strength. "Your lies have twisted my fate and robbed me of my dignity. You spread rumors without any truth out of spite." Hargrove opened his mouth to retort, but quickly realized he was losing control over the narrative. Seizing the moment, Eli stepped forward beside Claire, his presence commanding respect. "It's time for this town to hear not just accusations but also evidence, the truth." He gestured toward Claire with fervor. "Give her a chance to speak or risk letting fear dictate your actions." Faced with unexpected unity between Eli and Claire, the townsfolk began murmuring among themselves. Slowly but surely, doubt crept into their minds, laying bare the reality that they may have once acted hastily. In this pivotal moment of confrontation, illuminated by the lantern's gentle glow and mingled with apprehension from past wrongdoings, Claire felt empowered, no longer just a victim, but a force for change, determined to reclaim her life from falsehoods and manipulation. Today would mark not just a turning point for herself, but for all those in Laramie willing to witness justice unveiled through voices once silenced by fear. With Eli steadfast at her side and courage surging through her veins, Claire stood ready to fight not just for herself but against all who sought to distort truth into fiction for their own gain. As dawn broke over Laramie, the town was still shrouded in the remnants of darkness, but Claire Maddox felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through her veins. The night before had changed everything. Eli's unwavering support and their shared determination illuminated the path ahead. Today was not just about facing her accusers, it was about reclaiming her dignity and standing firm against the tide of injustice that had threatened to engulf her. With Eli by her side, Claire walked into the town square, her heart pounding with both anxiety and resolve. The sun began to rise, casting golden rays that danced on the cobblestones. But what lay ahead in this public arena felt daunting. A small crowd had already gathered, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity and hostility, a testament to the rumors that had spread like wildfire throughout Laramie. Claire could see Mr. Hargrove at the forefront of the gathering, his smug confidence radiating as he whispered to some townsfolk who hung on his every word. He appeared to relish the spectacle, but today, Claire wouldn't allow him to manipulate her any longer. Today was about truth. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward into the throng of people. "Everyone," she called out, her voice clear and unwavering as she commanded attention. Eyes turned toward her, some filled with skepticism and others with intrigue. "I stand before you not as a thief or an enemy, but as a woman who has been wronged by your assumptions." The air hung thick with tension as she continued. "I refuse to let lies dictate my worth or my future." Eli stood beside her, a silent pillar of strength. His presence emboldened Claire further. She locked eyes with him for a brief momenta, reminder that she wasn't alone in this fight. As Claire recounted her story, the grief following her husband's death and how Mr. Hargrove's false accusations had shattered her life, she felt anger bubbling beneath the surface, but controlled it with purpose. "The truth is not just mine. It belongs to each of you," she proclaimed passionately. "We cannot allow ourselves to be swayed by rumors and hatred. Justice should shine brightly for those who seek it." The crowd murmured amongst themselves, uncertainty creeping into their expressions as they absorbed Claire's words. She could see glimmers of doubt flickering in their eyes, a sign that perhaps they were beginning to question what they thought they knew. Sledge stepped forward defiantly, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "You think you can just spin your story around?" he scoffed angrily, trying to undermine Claire's authority even as doubt spread through others in attendance. But Eli interjected swiftly, taking several steps forward with an intensity that demanded respect. "What you're doing is wrong," he stated boldly, directing his gaze at Sledge before sweeping his eyes over the crowd. "This woman is more than what you've labeled. Hersha deserves your respect until proven otherwise." A ripple of agreement spread among some onlookers, while others remained unsure about taking a stance against Sledge or Hargrove, each man representing a different side of morality in their small town. In that moment, Claire realized that the battle was not just hers. It was emblematic of something larger, an opportunity for healing within Laramie itself. She would fight for herself, but also for anyone else subjected to unfounded accusations and injustices. With renewed vigor, and Eli's unwavering support beside her, Claire pressed on, challenging not only those who sought to harm her reputation, but also inspiring others to find their own voices in solidarity against prejudice. As sunlight broke across Tona, heralding sign of hope, Claire embraced this moment fully. Together with Eli, and any allies willing to stand with them against wrongdoing, they would rewrite their destinies from victims to champions of justice in the face of adversity.